स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतङ्गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Today's topic, Sri Ramakrishna, the son of spirituality. Sri Ramakrishna has given to us practical spirituality. He has made it very clear what is meant to be spiritual, how one should conduct oneself in the spiritual life, and how to realize the truth, how to know one's own real nature, how to know the indwelling Spirit. Sri Ramakrishna has shown by his own life. He has given tremendous hope and assurance for the spiritual seekers so that they can very definitely realize God in this very life. Shankaracharya, the great spiritual teacher, has said that one has to experience one's true nature in this very life. When you are living, when you are conscious, you must know the truth. That is the meaning of attaining freedom while you are in this earthly life. Freedom, it's a tremendous thing to have real freedom. In the real freedom, you feel the real joy, and that real freedom is attained by realizing God in this very life. So, there is no confusion about the spirituality. Everything is very clear. It means what it says. It means practical. You will have to be practical if you have to have experience in spiritual life. So, you find that spirituality in Sri Ramakrishna in full measure. Once he said, he was talking to devotees. When he was in an ecstatic mood, he revealed. He said to them, "Where are you going about looking for spirituality? There is nothing elsewhere as much as you find here." Sri Ramakrishna is referring to his own It's a great utterance. It's a great utterance. You should know that it was not an egotistic utterance. Sri Ramakrishna was absolutely free from that vice. He never entertained any egotistic attitude. If a person has even the trace of egoism, he will never realize the truth properly. Sri Ramakrishna was an instrument through which the Divine Mother worked. The Divine Mother fully manifested in Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna never felt that it was he who was teaching anything to anybody. It was the Divine Mother who was everything. Every utterance was from her and from her alone. That was the firm conviction of Sri Ramakrishna. Firm conviction. That's the hallmark of spirituality. Do you have firm conviction about what you are doing? About what you are practicing? About what you are trying to achieve? And that is indeed the essence of spirituality. The spiritual growth depends upon your firm conviction. If you are shaky in the conviction, then you will not be able to move an inch forward in spiritual life. So in order to be spiritual, you will have to completely eliminate your ego. When the ego is eliminated, then what happens? That vacancy will then be filled up by the divine. Then it follows the man within becomes dead and God begins to dwell inside. Now that is what spirituality means. Eliminating our ego and thereby allowing the divinity within to manifest itself. You may give up anything, but if you don't give up ego, then it will not make any sense in spiritual life. So, you must eliminate ego, and Sri Ramakrishna himself has shown in his life how he was totally free from ego. Everything inside was the Divine Mother of the universe. So, taming and conquering the ego are very, very important in spiritual life. A person of ego, you know how he behaves, you know how he performs, how he moves with the people. Everybody knows an egoistic person behaves very rudely and he behaves at times brutally. Sometimes he says, "What don't they know me? I have so much wealth and property. Who is so wealthy as I am? Who dares to suppress me? Who dares to surpass me? Who dares to challenge me?" And he behaves in a very irrational way sometimes. So the I which makes one worldly and deeply attached to the things and pleasures of the world, this type of I or egoism is mischievous. You can never be happy really if you are harboring, nourishing this ego. As long as one is egoistic, he cannot be spiritual. That means he is far, far away from God. So the indication that a person is spiritual depends on how humble that person is. One has to be very humble. So Sri Ramakrishna repeatedly tells that this ego is the one that separates the individual soul and the universal Paramatma. The barrier is because of this ego. This ego is obstructing to see the reality. The reality is behind this ego. You have to transcend this ego. You have to go beyond this ego. Sri Ramakrishna gives an example. Suppose a stick is placed on the surface of water. The water will appear to be divided into two sections. The division is because of the stick that you have placed in the water. The stick is the I, the aham, which we call in Sanskrit aham. Take that away, remove that stick away. What do you find? The water becomes again undivided. The water was undivided originally. It appeared to be divided because of the stick. Once the stick is taken out, you find undivided water. So, the ego is very persistent. That's why we are born again and again in this world. So it is this ego that keeps you coming back and forth into this world. You are running after so many situations, problems, sufferings, on account of this ego. So spirituality begins when you try to tame this ego. You have to become aware of that. Sri Ramakrishna says, if one ponders over this word I, trying to track it down, what does he see? One sees that it is only a word which denotes egotism. But it is extremely difficult to shake it off. So one must say, well, a stage will come when you know that I is responsible for all your suffering. Then you have to take some positive steps in order to get out of this suffering. So you should address yourself, you wicked I, if you will not go by any means, then remain as a servant of God. The ego that feels itself to be the servant of God is called the ripe ego. The servant I, the I of a devotee, the I of a child is not harmful. Each of these is like a line drawn with a stick on the surface of water. This I does not last long. Even if the ego of the servant or the ego of the devotee remains, one who has realized God can hurt none. He will never hurt anybody. That is the fruit of spirituality. When you are fully matured in spiritual life, what's the indication? You love everyone. You love all the beings. You love the whole creation. You love everything. There is nothing but love exists in you. So the whole sting of individuality vanishes from him. He envelops the whole universe by love. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example, the sword becomes gold by a touch of the philosopher's stone. It retains its former shape but can no longer hurt anyone. As a piece of rope, when burnt, it retains its form but cannot serve to bind. The burnt rope cannot bind a person. So is the ego, which is burnt by the fire of supreme knowledge. And Sri Ramakrishna referring to himself, said, well, I have totally surrendered myself at the feet of the Divine Mother. There is nothing of I in me. Everything, every bit of myself, every part of it is Mother and Mother alone. He was very emphatic and he was very clear and he was very firm in his conviction because he had realized the Divine Mother. So, there is nothing more to be known. By having the vision of the Divine Mother, he is free from once and for all suffering. He is free from suffering. He is always cheerful, happy. And that everlasting cheerfulness, that blissful nature is because of the Divine Mother manifesting her glory fully in him. So, referring to himself, he said, well, the Divine Mother has kept a little of I, because you have to function, If you don't have that sense of I-ness, how will you function in this world? So, he says, a little of I for the purpose of preserving the body. Otherwise, the body will not survive. Secondly, why that little I is retained? In order to do practice of devotion to God. You will love to practice. You will love to sit in meditation. You will love to do worship. You will love to do spiritual activities. And you will love to be with the devotees of God. And then for giving, for sharing the spiritual joy to others. So, this I is used in so many good ways. It becomes a right channel for the flow of the divine energy. In order to show spirituality, Sri Ramakrishna has come in this form. The Divine Spirit comes frequently in human form in order to show the path to the suffering people. So, we must try to eliminate ego, which is the cause of suffering. The more we try to think of God, the more we fill our mind with thoughts of Him, the less will be our human imperfections. Why we are not able to see God, though we want to see Him? It is because our heart is impure. Perfection comes only when we think of the perfect and not of the imperfections we are familiar with in our every turn of life. You have to constantly dwell on the perfect. You must think of the perfect as much as possible. That's why we always emphasize on repeating the divine name of God, the symbol of perfection. God means perfect. God means pure. Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. I am that pure self, the embodiment of knowledge, the embodiment of bliss. Ever free. Nitya Shuddha Buddha Muktaha Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. Shiva means I am that pure spirit, that pure consciousness, which is totally pure. That is called Shiva. The Lord of the universe is the perfection itself. So, are we trying to think of perfection in our daily activities? To think of perfection means to think of God. Spirituality is to be attained by sincere and steady spiritual practices. Again, coming to Sri Ramakrishna, you see how he wholeheartedly, devotedly underwent spiritual practices. Thereby, he is teaching us one has to make self-effort. One has to divert all his senses, mind, everything towards God. What generally we see is that people like to talk, but they don't like to live. That's the point. When you start trying to live, then you are really marching yourself towards the goal. That's the difficulty we are facing. People talk glibly about God, they talk about spirituality, they talk about divine life. They have got number of interfaith dialogues almost every weekend in some part of the world. But still, they are where they are. Spirituality is not obtained by just talking over the matter. It is to be attained only by living the life. Living. So Sri Ramakrishna has come to show that. Come on. Study my life. Live in this manner. Practice in this way. You must attain spirituality. So, tons of talk don't measure much when there is not even an ounce of action. That means practice is what is important. If you are following Sri Ramakrishna, it means you have to be practical. To come to Sri Ramakrishna means to become practical. That's why you find Sri Ramakrishna's great disciple Swami Vivekananda advocated practical Vedanta, how to practice Vedanta in daily life. It's not for simply intellectual study. So Sri Ramakrishna has shown the path clearly. We will have to follow it to the best of our ability. Gradually, our imperfections will disappear and the grace of Sri Ramakrishna will illumine every nook and corner of our heart, which at present is full of darkness. The darkness is because of ignorance, the darkness because of impracticality, the darkness because of lack of firm conviction. So, to attain spirituality, one has to follow the footsteps of the illumined ones. Here the importance of studying in depth life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. Everything about spirituality has been given in the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Spiritual wisdom, you get there. If you are really aspiring for spiritual life, if you are really aspiring for the realization of God, then follow the spiritual wisdom given by Sri Ramakrishna in the gospel. The ocean of wisdom is there. Take as much as you can. Sri Ramakrishna says, whatever I have said, whatever practices I have done, they are only to set an example. There is no need for Sri Ramakrishna to practice all those austerities. He was ever pure. He was ever perfect. So there was no necessity for him to practice any kind of asceticism or devotion to reach that perfection, that purity. But he underwent great ascetic practices, not for a few days or a few months, for many years he underwent rigorous spiritual practices. And then finally he tells, well, every portion of that act was for the benefit of others. Sri Ramakrishna is for us. Everything of him belongs to us. Sri Ramakrishna didn't live for himself. He lived for others. He could have cast off his body anytime he wanted. But no, He stayed on as much as he could so that he could help the people to come towards God. That was his concern. His purpose in life was to bring the people towards God. People are losing themselves in too much of materialism, totally ignoring the spiritual dimension. So Sri Ramakrishna came to show that everyone has that spiritual dimension. Why don't you develop it properly? Why don't you develop? So developing spiritual dimension is essential. So when we say that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation of God, we mean that his appearance was an act of grace on the part of the divine. It's out of infinite grace God descends on this earth and suffers for the sake of us. He behaves like 100% human being and then shows that he is divine. He is human in appearance but divine in content. So he manifested himself within the bounds of humanity so that we could feel nearness with him and could try to illumine our lives through the rays that he disseminated everywhere in all directions. Sri Ramakrishna showed a way which is without any kind of haziness and doubts and difficulties. A way which is full of hope, which is full of inspiration, a way which we can accept, adore and emulate. That's what is necessary for people who seek spirituality. So, spirituality does not consist in abstract words or scholarly discussions. We have got a specific subject in universities, philosophy. They keep on talking, discussing. Just an academic discussion, that's all. There is no impact on your practical life. So, application is more important than merely ending up in discussion. Spirituality can be communicated, and it has been communicated not only to the people who were around Sri Ramakrishna when he was living in his physical body, but also to those who came after. The communication is continuing unabated even now. That's really remarkable. Last year I had been to Austin for a program, and there was a program night about the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. A few devotees were present, and there was one devotee in that group who has come driving 2 hours to attend that program. 2 hours he has driven, and after the program is over, he has gone back. Again coming next day for the program held elsewhere, driving again 2 hours. The amazing part is that how did he come to Vedanta? What inspired him to come to Vedanta? When he revealed, I was so surprised to hear that. He said, once he had a dream. In the dream, he has seen Sri Ramakrishna. He did not know anything about him, and he could not figure out who that person was. But it was very vivid, clear, and it was staying in his heart. Well, who that person was, I want to see. So he began to inquire all people. One day he was looking some book in some bookstore. When he was turning the leaves of a book, he found in a book the form of Sri Ramakrishna. Immediately jumped. Well, this is the form I saw in my dream. Who is this person? Then interest created in him, and he began to read, and he began to shed tears of joy. Tears of joy. That made him to come. That made him to come to hear about Sri Ramakrishna. And I could see so much of sincerity in him. Because he was sincere, he got the grace of God. How? By the vision of Sri Ramakrishna in his dream. It may be a dream, but then it started giving him hope. Hope in this life. Otherwise life would be hopeless. If you are not directing yourself to spirituality, life is really hopeless. So, we have got to open the doors of our heart to let in that good breeze, that blessed light, to remove all darkness from the nooks and corners of our heart, and to soothe us who are scorched with the miseries of worldly life. That is how we can be spiritual, by emulating Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna said, I was meditating with closed eyes, but I did not like it. Is God there only when I close my eyes and meditate? Is He not there when I open my eyes and look around? As a matter of fact, a spiritual person like Sri Ramakrishna never sees anything except the divinity manifested everywhere. Due to our short-sightedness, we make a difference between good and evil, between spirituality and materiality. But to the illumined ones, nothing is material. To them, nothing but the divine is present everywhere, in the so-called good and evil, and other pairs of opposites. Everywhere and in everything exists the divine and nothing else. God alone is real, and everything else is unreal. The Upanishad declares, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. All this is verily Brahman. It is Brahman only through all of us functioning. It is all pervading reality. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. For people who are not practicing spirituality, for those spirituality was not a practical thing, for them this statement, all is verily Brahman, is merely a sermon. But to great personalities like Sri Ramakrishna, it's a fact of experience during every moment of their life. Now that is what is important, and that is what makes all the difference between experience or realization and mere speculation. We may be scholars, we may have 3 PhDs in different subjects on philosophy, we may be able to amaze people by our erudition and oratory, but nothing happens. Those talks are of no avail. It is said in the Vivekananda, a beautiful Sanskrit verse is there, Vagvaikari Shabdanjari Shastra Vyakhyana Kaushalam Vaidushyam Vidushan Tadvat Bhuktaye Natu Muktaye. Excellent. The meaning is, loud speech consisting of a shower of words, the skill in expounding scriptures, and erudition, all these merely bring on a little personal enjoyment to the scholar, but are not good for mukti, spiritual freedom. Spiritual freedom demands your practical life. Without your practical spiritual life, you will not be able to have the freedom. So, all this scholarship, the beautiful expressions that make everyone amazed and happy, the deep erudition in the scriptures, this nothing really helps. In Sri Ramakrishna, there is absolutely no external show. People want show. There was no religious garb. Why? Sometimes not even his loincloth. Simpler than the simplest, humbler than the humblest. That is Sri Ramakrishna. So, though he had not studied any of the scriptures, yet we find that great scholars and seekers of spirituality sat at Sri Ramakrishna's feet and drank the nectar flowing from his words. He is the best illustration of what spirituality means and what a really spiritual man can do. He can disseminate spirituality all around. That's what Sri Ramakrishna did, and that's what we found in the lives of his great disciples as well. And Sri Ramakrishna disseminated spirituality through his direct disciples. Through Vivekananda, he gave the most wonderful message of Vedanta in the West. For the first time, people opened their eyes to know what exactly Hinduism means. Hinduism, it is based on just principles. It is not based on people or persons. Principles. It is based on the core, it is based on the theme of spirituality. The essence of spirituality you find in true Hinduism, which Swami Vivekananda gave in the West, which is all present in the Upanishads, which was not known to all the people in the world. Only a handful of people knew about the knowledge of the Upanishads, and Swami Vivekananda came to broadcast this glorious spiritual truth to everyone. Let us scatter these seeds. Scatter these seeds all over the world. Wherever it wants, let it sprout. Wherever the people are sincere, they will take it up and live their life. That is how Sri Ramakrishna is spreading the real spirituality through these noble disciples. If we are to think of spirituality, so we have to think of Sri Ramakrishna and element souls. Without doing that, mere reading of scriptures will not help much. At best, you may be recognized as a greatest Pandit of the world. You may have that recognition. A mere Pandit always tends to be boastful and indulges in vain discussions and is always interested in debates. But what do you see in Sri Ramakrishna? He never made any show of learning. He said, it is Sri Ramakrishna's words, I am the most ignorant among the ignorant people. But who was wiser than him? We should not just worshipping Sri Ramakrishna with flowers, not simply calling him the greatest avatars. We must enshrine him in our heart. We should install Sri Ramakrishna in our heart. Let us try to imbibe the spirit that Sri Ramakrishna stands for.
Let us try to emulate his life in however small a measure. And then, and only then, we shall understand what true spirituality is. So, our heart has to be cleaned. Our mind has to be made a little more honest and earnest. Then only shall we be able to imbibe the spirit that Sri Ramakrishna represents. His life was for the regeneration of mankind, to show them the path to reach the divine. Sri Ramakrishna said, "Verily, I tell you, I know nothing but God." He did not concern himself with anything else, but he was concerned with one fact, which is the only fact that life should be concerned with. It is the only fact that we should also concern ourselves with. We can know Sri Ramakrishna to the extent we are approaching him in that purity, in that divinity, in that wisdom. If we try, we can be at least a small particle of dust from his feet. Just a little particle which cannot reflect much of that light, but nonetheless which has in it the same essence as the rays of the blazing sun. In Sri Ramakrishna, you will acquire fulfillment. He doesn't want anything of you, only he wants your sincerity, your earnestness. And Sri Ramakrishna himself has shown how he was very earnest, how he was very sincere, how he pursued his spiritual path with undivided attention and devotion, and everything what he has said about spirituality is lived upon by himself. That's why we call him the son of spirituality. There is no dogmatism, there is no fanaticism. As wide as sky, as deep as ocean. That is Sri Ramakrishna. So, you must get rid of all the imperfections, doubts bothering you. Just you start with sincerity. Everything will be done properly, and you will see how Sri Ramakrishna's grace flows upon you. Once you touch that grace, you feel yourself tremendously pure. Even that feeling of purity itself gives a great joy. Great joy. So, spiritual life is really a very glorious life, and it is for living that spiritual life you are being born as a human being. So let us pray to Sri Ramakrishna that he may bless us, that we may have a little of that awakening in our heart, a little of that hankering in our heart for the kind of spiritual life lived by Sri Ramakrishna. Then we really become blessed. When we reach the reality, when we experience God, then we feel total fulfillment. With these words, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May that Brahman protect us. May that Supreme Lord nourish us. May we work in harmony with great vigor. May our study be illuminating and fruitful. May we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.